Hello YouTube, Dave here again. Today I'm going to be taking a look at the Alien role-playing game Destroyer of Worlds box set. This was put out by Free League Publishing, who did send this to me for the purposes of this review. So I just want to make that abundantly clear that this was sent to me. However, they are not influencing the video, they're not scripting it, or telling me to give it a positive review or anything. They're not pre-screening the video or anything like that. So the opinions expressed in this video are 100% completely and totally my own. Destroyer of Worlds is a cinematic style adventure for the Alien role-playing game, which means that you don't need the core rulebook in order to run this particular box set. All that you need is the rulebook from the starter set, and you are good to go. So if you have the starter set and you're interested in Destroyer of Worlds, a box set, then you have everything that you need. Of course, if you want to get the core rulebook, that's completely great as well. I do have the core rulebook. I was able to pick up a copy of it, so I will be doing a review of that probably within hopefully a week or so of this video going up. But first things first, I just want to really kind of point out the awesome artwork on the cover of this box. I just absolutely love it. It just feels like such an iconic image with the alien, the xenomorph, and the colonial marines. Because in this scenario, you take on the role of colonial marines on this frozen moon. In this like oil-rich moon that's about to be abandoned. But before that happens, the characters have to go try to find some other colonial marines that have deserted and have gone AWOL. So there's a bit more to it as well, but that's just sort of the basic premise to begin with. So taking a look inside the box set, we've got our cards. So these are personal agenda and personal agenda cards for each of the 7 characters included here, as well as some story cards. So there's some events that can take place where you've got the objectives on these cards. There's also going to be some weapon cards and some cards for some of the vehicles. I'm not going to open these up in this video because they are very similar to the cards that I'd shown when I did the video for the starter set, but these are in here as well. And this is one of the things I actually, again, really like about the cinematic style of play with these pre-written scenarios is that you can actually have like these agendas and stuff like that. And I think it's really kind of neat because again, it captures the feel, I think, more of like the Alien movies and stuff like that. So I think it's really, really cool. And the personal agendas really work best with the cinematic style because you're not expecting everyone to make it out, and some people, obviously are going to have their own reasons to be doing what they're doing. So just really cool stuff there. And then we have the games catalog for Free League Publishing. So of course we got our Alien RPG stuff right up front. Then some other RPGs or other products that they support, including Forbidden Lands, Tales from the Loop, which is a pretty well-known RPG as well, and then a few others. So I will try to include a link to their website in the description below, freeleaguepublishing.com. So if I forget that, at least it is here for you to check out. But if I do forget, just remind me and I'll try to put that up there. Here we have the scenario booklet itself. And the booklet is actually, again, very high quality, in my opinion. So it's got like the spine on it and everything, and it's got the matte finish to it. So it just, again, feels really, really professional, really, really nice in terms of the quality of it. And the artwork inside, there's not a ton of artwork. There's a lot of maps and stuff like that because there are a lot of different locations that the characters have to interact with. But the artwork that is in here is fantastic. And again, it seems to be all unique art when we get to it here. So it's not still shots from the movies or panels ripped from like the comics or stuff like that. It all appears to be, relatively unique for these products. At least I haven't seen the artwork anywhere. And again, it's just some really fantastic stuff in here. So that's one of the things that has always impressed me with this RPG. Looking through the starter set, looking through this, and even going through the core rulebook, is that again the artwork is all unique to the products themselves. They didn't take the easy way out, and which they could have, and it would have been totally justified. Like you could have had images of the Marines from the movies in here, and I don't think anyone would have minded too much. But again, they went the extra mile and actually did all unique artwork, which again is fantastic. And Well, the art, though, sort of sparse. Where they do have it, it is, again, absolutely fantastic. So we'll get back to the adventure in a little bit. I'm going to try to keep this as spoiler-free as possible because I don't want to give away a lot of the key events that take place. But we'll get back to the scenario in a second here. We have the characters, which I'll look at in a moment. We also have our maps and player maps and the large fold-out map, which is just a bit too big to actually unfold to be able to view in this video. So I will try to have images of them up on my channel's Instagram page. But the thing that I actually really like about these is that they remind me of what you would see on the old, green phosphor CRT monitors from like the computers from the 70s, or computers that we would have been using in the time that the Alien movies were made. So it just sort of has that, that retro, the futuristic retro feel to it, which is really, really cool. That's, again, a nice little attention to detail that I find here is like, this looks like, plans that you would actually bring up on a computer screen for the characters to be able to reference. So I don't know. I like that. I like that approach. I think it's actually really well done. All right, so here we have the 7 player characters, or potential player characters for your group to choose. Now, you don't necessarily need to fill all 7 roles at the very beginning of the game. One of the beautiful things about these cinematic style scenarios is that making it all the way through to the end isn't necessarily going to happen for everybody. And when you're going up against xenomorphs and stuff like that, it can be very easy for your character to meet an unfortunate end. But having extra characters does give you a pool of NPCs you can play, you can draw from, in the event that a player character dies. During the course of play, they can just pick up one of the NPCs and seamlessly drop back in to the scenario. So, again, 7 characters are made for this. You don't necessarily need to put them all at, you don't necessarily need to fill them all at the table or anything like that. It is good to have a few backups. And worst case scenario, if you really need to dip into some extra characters, if you have the starter set, you could use some of the characters in there as just the colonists, and instead of all being Colonial Marines. But that's, again, something for, a worst case scenario type of thing. So looking at the character sheets, we're just going to sort of go over what we have here for the characters. I'll just sort of go over some of the basics here. And then we'll just show, both sides of the sheet for the characters here. I'm not going to describe every character in detail, but we will start with this one here. So this first character is Stanley T. Zemensky. He is a Colonial Marine, and so here is the character. So the way that the characters are designed in the Alien role-playing game is there are 4 attributes, and the attributes you can see in the center of the character sheet. There is strength, wits, empathy, and agility. And then each attribute has 3 skills that are attached to it. So for strength, you have heavy machinery, close combat, and stamina. For wits, you have observation, survival, and communications technology, or comtech, or computer technology, comtech, I should say. And then empathy, you have command, manipulation, medical aid. And finally, with agility, you have range combat, mobility, and piloting. So you can see you have your base attributes here, and they can be anywhere, like I think 5 is the absolute maximum based on the character that you're playing. And then everything else ranges from 5 or 4 or less. Now the number represents the number of 6-sided dice you roll when making a check that involves that attribute. So for basic strength check for Zemensky here, he would be rolling 4d6. However, if you were making a close combat roll, so attacking somebody in like a melee scenario, he would actually add the number here to this number, and that's the total number of dice that he's looking to roll. So Zemensky, in a close combat scenario, will be rolling 7d6. The important thing on your checks, your skill checks, is just to determine how many successes that you get. And a success is basically how many 6s you roll. So 7d6 does sound like a lot. However, when you're looking at combat situations, characters wearing armor or creatures with a natural armor rating, such as the xenomorphs, they get to roll d6s to try to absorb or reduce that damage and they would roll whatever their armor rating is. So in this case, Zemanski has an armor rating of 6. So if someone were to attack him with a physical attack, he can roll his armor rating, and however many successes that he gets on those 6d6 in this case, determines how many points of damage are reduced. So it does sort of balance out in that way. So again, it does sound like a lot of dice, but it is something where there are counterbalances, and at least in my personal experiences, I know I've picked up handfuls of d6 before and rolled, all of them at once or all of them, in short succession, and with like 11 dice getting nothing higher than a 3 has happened. In fact, I want to say in some of the example rolls that I did in the starter set video, I want to say that even when I rolled those, there weren't any 6s in the first roll. I don't know if that made it in the video or not, but the first roll that I made was like 7 dice, and none of them came up with a 6. So, there is that. But that's basically how that works. And again, if you don't have a number in the skill, you just roll the base attribute value that you have there. So, for example, Zemanski trying to make a heavy machinery check would just get the 4d6. Now, anything involving this character in empathy is sort of right out because he only has 2 empathy and no ranks in any of the empathy-based skills. So, command, manipulation, or medical aid, you do not want him to be the person trying to bandage you up because it's just not going to go well. So underneath, like I said, we do have the armor and armor rating and encumbrance value. Then there's other stuff to keep track of here as well. So we have the personal agenda, if you wanted to fill that in. Relationships, so if you have a character that you're friendly to or friends with, you can have them as your buddy, as well as a rival. So this guy is actually a rival with the character of Hammer. You have your stress level. So stress level, certain actions that you take throughout the game or certain experiences that you go through can add stress to you. So stress are actually additional d6s that you roll, but they're typically, there's something different about them to distinguish them from your standard dice that you're rolling. Because with the stress dice, you can roll a 6 and that can contribute towards your successes in whatever check you're making. However, if you roll a 1 on those dice, you run the risk of actually panicking, and panicking can be really bad. You could just run off in a random direction. You could just shut down and become comatose. You could snap and try to attack the person nearest you. There's a lot of bad things that can happen with that, so it is something you need to be a little careful with. We also have some check boxes for health. Once your health is reduced to 0, you roll for I think it's called major wound or a wound, and that can affect certain things like skill checks or other abilities that you might have. Critical injuries is what it's called, because there's a spot for critical injuries right underneath there. Check marks for different conditions that you might get, like starving, dehydrated, exhausted, or freezing. There's also a radiation tracker. Radiation can be really bad. And then just, consumables of air, food, power, and water, depending on the scenario or situation that you find yourself in. You also have your equipment here. So there is your basic gear list on one side, and then your weapons written out down below your attributes. So this character has an M4 1A pulse rifle. So just to take a look at the pulse rifle here, so +1. The bonus there, that's how many extra dice you would be adding to your roll to attempt to use that weapon. So with Pulse Rifle, you make a ranged combat roll. So he's got a 5 agility and a 3 in ranged combat. So using the Pulse Rifle, you add an extra dice to that for the +1. So he'd be rolling 9d6, which is, again, pretty good. But at the same time, it's what this character does best. So it makes sense that he'd be good at it. So then you've got your damage. So your base damage for this weapon is 2 points, 2 points of damage. Any successes you get beyond the first one, you can use to actually increase the damage you put out. So if you're rolling 9d6 and 5 of them come up with 6s, you could actually do, the first one goes towards your initial success. That just means that you hit and you do the listed damage. But the other 4 can be added on top of that, in order to determine, so you've actually done a total of 6 damage, and then your opponent, if they have armor, would roll their armor rating value and dice, and any 6s they get would subtract from that total, and they take whatever's left over at the end. So that's sort of how that works. Then you got range of long, medium, and engage, so basically how far away you are in combat. So a pretty universal RPG thing there. There's some tiny items. So tiny items generally speaking, do not consider to be added towards encumbrance. And then we have the talents up here. So talents are things based off of your career path that you choose. So in this case, Colonial Marines. So this individual has the talents of Hard Hitter and Hothead. So let's just flip the character sheet over, because on the other side, we have an actual portrait of the character, as well as a little bit of background information about your character, or personality information that you may want to use to help you to portray the character. It does also give you the relevant stat information on here as well, including how much your health is, so you can keep that in mind. This is also really useful for running this character as an NPC in the event that none of the players choose this particular person, but you want them around in case, you know, a character bites it. So it gives you all that there. And then the talents are listed here. So we have Hard Hitter, and again, Hothead. So Hard Hitter gives you a +2 modification to close combat if you sacrifice your fast action. So in combat, you get a fast action and a slow action. So the fast action is, you know, there's things like, you know, they're just minor things that you can do. However, if you hold on to your fast action, you can use it later on to try to defend against attacks, basically. Like, you know, try to grab a weapon, if like a melee weapon, if someone's trying to, you know, hit you with it, or knock their hand out of the way. There's, you know, so there's things you can do with it if you don't use it when it comes your turn, if you just want to make your, like, a weapon attack or whatever. But in this case, if you forego the ability to do that, you get to add +2 to your roll, which is, again, 2 extra d6 in close combat. So, again, an ability that you may want to consider in the event that you're in close combat situations. And then Hothead says you do not like being told what to do. You get a +2 modification to opposed rolls for manipulation whenever someone tries to give you orders. The talent can also be used to resist an officer's career talent of pull rank. So if we went back to the character's manipulation, which was part of empathy, it's just 2 and then nothing. So that would give you a total of 4 dice instead of 2, basically. So it gives you that sort of, that's how the bonuses work in this game. Penalties are the same thing. If something gives you a minus, then it takes away one of those 6-sided dice. So that was the first character there. Again, so I'm not going to go through all of everybody's you know, stats or everything here. If you do want to have a closer look, then again, feel free to pause the video and check everything out here. But the next character that we have is Kale Iona, another Colonial Marine, with the equipment that they have there, including this guy has a smart gun, which is pretty cool. It gives you a 3 bonus. And there's his character there. His talents are banter and past the limit. So that's pretty cool. Then we have Beatrice Silva, who's an officer. So a little bit higher rank than the other characters. They have the field commander and past the limit abilities. So Iona also had that ability. I'm not going to, again, read it out loud or anything, but so that's what they have there. So Field Commander. Then we have Chaplain. So Chaplain's actually really cool. So he is a medic. He also, so signature item, so one of his personal favorite items that he carries with him is false Chaplain mustaches. Because this guy's nickname is actually Charlie Chaplin. So he's got like the fake mustaches to sort of resemble Charlie Chaplin, I guess. But he is actually a droid, and a synthetic. So he's basically part of like the bishop class of synthetic artificial like life. So and he's open about it. He's not trying to hide it. He's not deceptive in any sort of way. He's clearly, you know, an android and has nothing, you know, wrong with that. Now the interesting thing about droids is they function differently in terms of how they take damage and how certain things can affect them. So, for example, they I don't think they ever have to deal with stress. Like, they never get stress dice. But when they're reduced to 0, there's a chart that you roll on. So, you know, it could affect which part of their body is disabled or destroyed, or they could just be completely obliterated. So it's one of those things where there's benefits to playing these characters, and then there's drawbacks, because they do get better attributes. As you can see, he's actually got 2 6s and 2 4s. But the trade-off is that it might be a little bit easier for him to bite the big one in the end. So again, it's kind of a neat thing, but he's a very interesting character and probably one of my favorites of the pre-written characters there. Then we have Luka Mason, another colonial marine. Pulse rifle, grenade launcher, service pistol, and incinerator unit. So he's got a flamethrower. Or she's got a she's got a flamethrower. Gunnery sergeant, nerves of steel and overkill. So that's pretty cool. And then we have Nathaniel A.W. Hammer, another colonial marine. If you recall, he was the rival to Zemensky at the very beginning there, although he's actually a rival with Luka Mason and not Zemensky. So, one person could view someone else as their rival while that individual doesn't necessarily reciprocate, which is kind of neat. And yeah, so pretty cool there. And then we've got his other information on this side. He's menacing, also has the overkill. Then we have Ruth and Dante, another colonial marine. This one is a weapon specialist with rocket-propelled grenades with a M5 RPG launcher. So again, pretty cool stuff there. Weapon specialist and the banter ability as well. So that brings us back to the actual meat and potatoes of this box set, the Destroyer of Worlds adventure. So this is a cinematic adventure. This is designed to be used with the pre-generated characters and is designed to take up between 2 to 3, 2, 3, or 4 sessions of play, depending on how long your RPG sessions are. So I don't want to spoil too much of the actual story here because it's a very interesting one. It's very well written and very much in line with what you would expect from something set in the Alien universe. The adventure begins with the characters all being pulled from their various squads. So they're not a group of Marines who typically work together. They may know of each other from working in different companies or stuff like that, or the couple of them might actually be from the same troops, but for the most part, they're all cherry-picked from other companies of Marines for a specific purpose. The moon colony that the characters are on, this frozen, Arctic blizzard wasteland colony, is about to be evacuated. One of the things in the Alien RPG is sort of the political scuffles or struggles between the different various factions, including the United, I think it's like the United Colonies or something like that. Then there's the United Americas, and then there's the People's Progressive Union or something like that, or the Union of Progressive Peoples, which is sort of like your communist country. So there's a lot of stuff kind of going on in this. But basically there are some skirmishes, border skirmishes, taking place, and this facility, which has been on the decline for quite some time anyway, is about to be abandoned. However, before that happens, everything was shut down to a complete and total stop, a complete and total halt, because a group of Marines stole some information or classified information or something and have gone AWOL. So the player characters are summoned to track down these traitors and bring them in along with anything that they've taken or stolen before it can find its way to the hands of basically, the wrong hands or the enemy. Like I said, I don't want to get into the specifics of what happens next throughout the scenario because there are some interesting twists and turns. But just as a little bit of a teaser, one of the characters is sort of an unknowing, bipolar, kind of schizophrenic character who may or may not be controlled by outside forces. And another individual in the group may actually be the subject of biological experimentation that had taken place prior to the scenario beginning. As the players progress, they go from their standard investigation to finding out of things like said biological experimentation taking place directly under their noses, actually, at the military base that they were originally part of, and it culminates in a desperate attempt to escape the planet, which is becoming infested by the classic xenomorph from the Alien movies. One of the things that this adventure does really well is, again, it captures that alien feeling incredibly well. It actually, I shouldn't say alien, it captures the aliens feeling really well, which is actually kind of interesting because the starter set scenario very much felt like the original Alien movie with elements of Prometheus and Alien Covenant thrown in there, although done in a much better way than Prometheus or Covenant, in my opinion. But this one has a very strong vibe of the Aliens movie. You're playing colonial marines. You are sent to do something routine at first, and then things get complicated before you suddenly find yourself fighting off a large number of these xenomorph creatures. There are some very graphic things that take place throughout this scenario, including a new type of like bloodburster, which were introduced in Alien Covenant. The description for how this one births is incredibly gross, but really, I mean, for me, as someone who's an Alien fan, it's something that I cannot wait to read the description to a group when I get the chance to run this for them. But there is some blood and gore, and this is not your family friendly ages 13 and up RPG. So that's one thing to really keep in mind, is that it's based off of the Alien franchise. And there's going to be a lot of blood, there's going to be a lot of gore, there's going to be foul language, which, yes, is written into this scenario, which is why I'm not going to read anything from the flavor text in this video. But yeah, there's going to be some rough stuff in there. So just make sure before you run it as a game mother that you sort of let your players know the kind of stuff that they may come up against, or as a player, you have to understand the source material before you dive into something, because this just you may not be someone who's into horror stuff, and if you're not, then there's other systems out there to check out. But if you are a fan of the Alien franchise or science fiction horror, then this is going to be a really, really interesting, uncomfortable and off-putting, but an interesting and fun time, I think, overall. So yeah, I have a lot of really nice things to say about this. I love the adventure, and like I said, it really feels like an Alien story. It's one of those things that whenever I read the scenarios included in these sets, be it the starter set or the Destroyer of Worlds, it to me just like, this is the kind of thing I would prefer to see as a movie than what we had with Covenant, what we had with Prometheus, or even what we had with Alien Resurrection, which you can I wasn't a fan of that one. So yeah, the writer absolutely nails the atmosphere and does a really excellent job of it. So my hats off to that. One thing about the adventure structure that I do want to touch on really quickly here is the way that these adventures are designed. You do want to do a pretty thorough job of your preparations before you go to begin running this game. The reason that I say that is you do have your description areas for the different places the characters are going to investigate, as well as the information for them, the room descriptions, and any of the potential encounters that are scripted to take place in those areas. So, that all that information is there. So if you want to do just the basic exploration stuff, that's pretty simple and straightforward. However, in addition to that, the scenarios also include a series of events. So we've got all of our location descriptions there, and then we have our events. So events are things that can occur throughout the scenario. They could take place seemingly at random. They could take place in response to some of the ways the characters may present themselves or handle themselves. Some of them are designed to take place in order to drive the story forward. So you'll see ones here that have mandatory listed next to it. But if they don't have mandatory listed next to it, they're just things that you can throw in there as well. I do recommend making use of the non-mandatory events if you go to run this scenario. You don't necessarily need to include every single one, but it is good to have a few that you can look at in the event that you're running this. And so maybe say the players are getting into a bit of a lull. Maybe they're sort of running into a brick wall in terms of progressing the story. Maybe they're going through things a little too quickly, or they don't maybe necessarily seem quite as engaged. You can throw some of these events at them to sort of drive things forward, or to push things in a different direction. So what I would recommend is, before you go to run your scenario, is to look through the act that you're going to be playing through, the locations that are included in that act, as well as the events, and just sort of read through all the events, read through the area locations, and maybe even just take time to jot down a flowchart of locations and events and progressions that you're expecting to run throughout the session. So that's just one thing to sort of keep in mind when you go to run this, because it is structured a little bit different than other RPGs out there. But I kind of like it because it gives you a lot of extra stuff that you can tack on there if you feel that it's right. So again, awesome stuff there. Overall, this is a really great product. I really enjoyed reading this scenario, and I'm honestly looking forward to hopefully getting a chance to run this at some point soon. I'm running a bunch of other RPGs at this point, so trying to throw on another one might be a little bit taxing. But I do hope to run this by the time, we get to maybe the end of the year or something like that, over the holidays or something. I really want to run this. The Alien franchise is one of my favorites of all time. And again, this adventure so well captures the feeling of the early Alien movies in ways that a lot of things have failed to do, prior to this and since the movie. So I'm really impressed with that. The quality of the writing is great. The characters are interesting. The locations are cool. And the monsters are, again, they're great, and they're really well presented in these adventures. So check it out if you are a fan of Alien, the Alien franchise, or if you are into the Alien RPG. I think this is going to be an absolute excellent pickup for you. And if you're just someone who loves to read Alien stuff, this might be worth picking up just to read through the scenario, because again, there's a lot of cool stuff in here. But definitely check it out if you're into Alien or science fiction horror in general. So awesome stuff there. Thanks again to Free League Publishing for sending this to me for the purposes of this review. Again, I just want to thank you for that, because this is something that would be very difficult to track down in my area. So thank you for that, and for the viewers watching this, check out Free League Publishing's website, because they got a lot of cool stuff that they do. Not just Alien, they've got all kinds of other RPGs and game systems that you can look at for anything that you may want. So definitely check them out. And thanks for all your support. Thanks for taking the time to watch this video, and I will see you next time. Take care.